Wednesdays around here mean it's time for Rekha's Voice. Rekha Basu from the Des Moines Register comes in each week to talk a little bit about something. And this morning, which direction are we pointing?
Well, this morning we're talking about... Yeah, exactly. Always left. Siempre a la izquierda, as we say in Spanish. No, what we're talking about today actually is, you know, political presidential campaign seasons bring in a lot of loonies.
No, really? Never would have guessed that.
Some of them as surrogates and some of them as conveners of conferences and rallies and places where presidential candidates are invited to speak. So on November 6th, my birthday, and 7th, there was a conference called the Religious Liberties Conference, which was sponsored by a long list of organizations, including Bob Vander Plaats's organization and the Family Leader and an Iowa group called Iowa Homeschool and a lot of other Christian educators and Illinois chapters of this and that. Anyway, their host was a fellow by the name of Kevin Swanson. And there is a videotape of him, which has actually been aired on national television, on MSNBC, on Rachel Maddow's show, in which this guy...
Well, I'll never see it then. So he's a pastor, right?
So he's a pastor,
Okay.
Exactly. He's a pastor, and he's supposed to be a national radio host and very well known in some ecumenical ministries. Anyway. So what was he carrying on about in this videotape? He's talking about how the Bible calls for death to gays, the death penalty for homosexuals, he said.
And I read your column last night, and he read it completely out of context. So
okay,
it's
so
sad it's sad that he did that.
Tell what the Bible actually says about it.
This was a letter that Paul wrote to the Romans. You know, after Jesus died, Paul wrote all these epistles, and there are biblical scholars who will probably do a better job of explaining this. But this particular letter was to the Romans. He was talking about all these people in Roman countries who had sinned and done all these horrible things, and then we go through the list of, you know, they did women slept with women and men slept with men, and these people did this and these people did that, and they are deserving of death. And then you go into chapter 2, which this guy didn't do. It talks about how everyone's a sinner and all of us are deserving of death, but then it goes on to say that, you know, we're saved by grace through faith. So what this guy did was stop at the end of chapter 1, not go into chapter 2 and say basically all of us are sinners.
Oh, wow.
So this is what
Thank you for clarifying
that's my interpretation.
I'm so glad you did.
I'm sure all of you have a Bible app on your phone, as I do, and you can
right.
you know, go
there you go.
Not so much, but yeah, but no, I mean, I think it's really important that you offer that kind of context, because I don't know the Bible. It's not my religion. Christianity is not my religion. I don't really have a religion, but I think that a lot of people hear this and it just sends absolutely the wrong message. And there's so many other things that were written in the Bible that are not relevant in our times. But what really got to me was the fact that this is being billed as a religious liberties conference. And all of a sudden, the notion of religious liberty in America seems to have morphed with some into the idea that your religion allows you to persecute other groups of people that are not harassing you, annoying you, doing anything to you, and that if you're not allowed to do that, then that's an attack on your religious freedom. And the whole theme of this conference and this guy's talk and the presidential candidates' talks at this conference was that there is an attack on Christianity because Christians are being forced to, basically, this is my words, not theirs, uphold the civil rights of gay people by, for example, issuing them marriage licenses when a Supreme Court has declared that there is that right. So if they're breaking the law and refusing to do that, as in the case of Kim Davis is her name, in Kentucky, right? Then they're saying that that's a form of discrimination against Christianity. And there were 3 Republican presidential candidates on the stage. There was Ted Cruz, there was Bobby Jindal, who since dropped out yesterday, and Mike Huckabee. And not one of them had anything to say to repudiate what this fellow Kevin Swanson was saying. Nothing. And I find that pretty abhorrent. He's calling for death to gay people and nobody speaks up. And in fact, and he says, you know, I'm not afraid of this and I'm willing to go to jail for it. And people in the audience are cheering and whistling and clapping. There were 1,700 people
Wow.
in this theater. it's really, I mean, to me, it's quite chilling.
Well,
frankly.
that part is very sad. I don't know that a candidate speaking at a forum have a job to slap down everything every nut job who's spoken in front of them said.
This is not just anything that's being said. This is death penalty for homosexuality. I mean, this is the kind of thing that we repudiate in Uganda. You can ask any one of these candidates how they feel about Uganda passing a death penalty bill, which subsequently had failed for gay people, and they would renounce it. You can be sure they would renounce it. But there's a call going on right here in Des Moines at a forum by the person who is sitting there and interviewing them on stage, and they defer completely. And I called each of their campaigns and asked their spokespeople if they had anything to say about this. Two of them didn't answer, and Huckabee's spokeswoman responded finally a day later. First, she wanted to see the video. I sent her the video. Then she responds the next day by email saying that Governor Huckabee was very pleased to be able to be in Iowa and speak to this audience.
He was the one that I would suspect would have stepped up and said something right away.
You think?
Yeah.
And I just want to make it clear that there's nothing biblical about what he said.
you.
The Bible doesn't call for gay people to be killed. Now certainly the Bible says that among other things, men marrying men and women marrying women would be sinful. But there are lots of sins in the Bible. There are whole bunches of them, and these would be one of them.
And so, and here's another passage I'd like to ask you about, actually. So then this fellow Swanson is recommending that if your son or daughter is planning to have a same-sex marriage, what should you as a parent do? You should cover yourself in sackcloth and ashes and cow dung and sit there on the ground at the entrance to the wedding ceremony.
Well, I wouldn't be doing that.
Well, I hope not.
No.
But what is that all about?
I don't know.
Sackcloth, ashes,
What?
cow dung? That's where you would be, the father of the bride.
That sounds like a Slipknot concert.
Be a lot cheaper than a tux.
I mean, there must be some biblical connotation to sackcloth, ashes.
Well, you
dung.
know, boy, we need to get back into the Old Testament, and these guys want to wrap this up, and I think this is really interesting. But what do we have next?
Well, I
do.
just want to make the point that these people are not running for Christian in chief of the United States. They're running for president. So the fact that these things should be talked about in a Christianity context in that way is even bogus.
But I do
Why
want to
would that
revisit
be?
one thing you said, and we've talked about this before on the show. One of the examples you talked about was probably the Gertz house in Grimes, where the nice people who ran that,
it could be,
were forced out of business because they would host a wedding ceremony.
Right.
And that's where you and I part ways, because I think what's happening where the government comes in and people, I mean, I think that was a setup, and there are more than one of these that
It could have been, but it's public accommodations.
But
We have
when
public
you come
accommodation
into
laws.
a private business that's
Right.
on private property,
Right.
and tell the business owner, if you do something that's against your religion, if you don't do it, we're going to sue you and put you out of business. That to me is a clear violation of the
But the
First
business
Amendment.
owner was not being asked to do anything, simply under public accommodation laws make their space available for an event.
And
that's the difference. They're not being asked to conduct the ceremony.
In their mind, they don't want to be a part of the ceremony because according to what they believe, they don't think the ceremony is right in the eyes of God. So they shouldn't be forced to be able to do that.
Right.
That's what they're saying.
Which is a different conversation from
In
what we
other
have
words,
here.
this is a debate that's going to be continuing
Right.
on, and it's done in extremes, and we can read your opinion on it in the paper.
You can indeed.
Wonderful. There's Rekha's voice.